The dust-choked air of Redemption Springs carried the scent of broken dreams as Zara Montgomery sat motionless atop a wooden crate outside the shuttered general store, her wedding dress collecting the dirt of the frontier town, tears tracing clean lines down her powder-smudged cheeks. It was 1878, and the promise of a new life had drawn Zara to this unforgiving corner of Arizona territory. The stage had deposited her 3 days ago with nothing but a small trunk of possessions, and a letter from her intended a rancher named Thomas, who had courted her through correspondence for 8 months. His last letter had promised to meet her arrival, make her his wife at the white-steepled church, and bring her to his homestead 10 miles beyond town. But Thomas never came. The first day, Zara waited with excited anticipation. The second, with growing concern. Now, on the third day, as the evening shadows stretched across the dusty Main Street, she had finally accepted the truth that Mrs. Holloway, the boarding house owner, had gently tried to explain. Men went missing in the West all the time. Accidents, outlaws, the elements, the frontier claimed lives without warning or ceremony. "Miss," the deep voice startled her. "Pardon me, but are you all right?" Zara looked up to see a tall man kneeling beside her crate. Dust clung to his worn leather chaps, and his dark hair curled from beneath a wide-brimmed hat. His face bore the weathered look of someone who lived under the open sky, but his eyes, a startling blue against his sun-browned skin, watched her with genuine concern. "I'm fine," she answered automatically, though her trembling voice betrayed her. The stranger's gaze took in her white dress, now gray with dust at the hem. "Doesn't look that way to me, madam." He removed his hat, revealing more of those black curls. "Name's Xavier Blackwood." "Most folks call me Zav." Zara clutched her reticule tighter. "I'm waiting for someone. Been waiting a while, I'd guess." His observation wasn't unkind, just matter of fact. Sun's setting. Not safe for a lady to be alone out here after dark. The first stars were indeed appearing in the fading blue above. Zara swallowed hard, tasting the salt of dried tears. "He was supposed to meet me 3 days ago," understanding dawned in Xavier's eyes. "You're intended," she nodded, not trusting her voice. "Got a name, maybe I know him." "Thomas Whitley. He has a cattle ranch north of here." She spoke the name with the last shred of hope she possessed. Xavier's expression changed subtly, and Zara knew before he spoke that whatever news he carried would not ease her heartache. "Miss, I'm sorry to tell you this, but Thomas Whitley sold his ranch 2 weeks back. Word is he headed to California with the proceeds." The world seemed to tilt beneath Zara. She had spent her life savings on the journey west, had left behind everything familiar in Philadelphia to marry a man who had apparently abandoned her without a backward glance. "You're mistaken," she whispered. "He wrote to me we were to be married." Xavier's weathered hand tentatively touched her arm. "I wish I were wrong. The new owner, Peterson, hired me to break some horses. I've been working that land for 10 days now." A sob escaped before Zara could trap it behind her lips. The last 3 days of uncertainty had been difficult, but this final confirmation crushed the fragile shell of hope she'd maintained. She had nowhere to go, no money to return east, no family to welcome her home even if she could afford the journey. Xavier glanced up and down the darkening street, clearly uncomfortable with her distress but unwilling to leave her alone. "Miss, do you have lodgings?" "Mrs. Holloway's boarding house," Zara managed, "but I can only afford 1 more night." He nodded, standing to his full height and extending a hand to help her up. "Let me escort you there. These streets aren't kind after sundown." Zara hesitated only briefly before accepting his hand. His palm was calloused but warm against hers as he helped her to her feet. The wedding dress, a simple affair she'd sewn herself, rustled around her ankles. "My trunk," she said, gesturing to where it sat beside the crate. "I've got it." Xavier lifted the trunk easily and tucked it under one arm. "This all you brought west? All I have in the world," she admitted. They walked in silence through streets that were emptying as the day's business concluded. A few cowboys stumbled from the saloon, and Xavier subtly positioned himself between them and Zara. She noticed the gun strapped to his hip then, worn with the comfortable familiarity of a tool rather than a weapon of aggression. "Have you been in Redemption Springs long?" she asked, desperate to fill the silence with something other than her own thoughts. "Born here," Xavier replied. "Left for a while during the war, came back after, never found reason enough to leave for good." "The war?" Zara glanced at him with new interest. "He didn't look old enough to have fought, joined up when I was 17. Cavalry." He didn't elaborate, and something in his expression discouraged further questions on that topic. Mrs. Holloway's boarding house appeared ahead, a 2-story white clapboard building with neat curtains in the windows. The landlady herself was sweeping the front porch despite the late hour, and she paused her work when she spotted them approaching. "Oh, Miss Montgomery, I was starting to worry." The older woman's eyes darted to Xavier, then to Zara's tear-stained face. "Xavier Blackwood, what brings you to my doorstep with my boarder?" "Evening, Mrs. Holloway, just making sure Miss Montgomery got back safely." The landlady's expression softened. "You heard about Thomas Whitley then?" she asked Zara gently. Zara nodded, fresh tears threatening. "Mr. Blackwood informed me." Mrs. Holloway shook her head. "Shameful business. Come inside, dear, you look done in." Xavier set the trunk down on the porch. "Mrs. Holloway, might I have a word with you, in private?" The two stepped aside while Zara sank into a porch chair, emotionally exhausted. She could hear their murmured conversation but couldn't make out the words. After a few minutes, they returned. "Miss Montgomery," Xavier said, replacing his hat, "Mrs. Holloway will take good care of you tonight. I'll come by tomorrow morning if that's all right with you." Before Zara could question why he'd want to see her again, Mrs. Holloway interjected, "Xavier's offered to help sort out your situation. He's one of the good ones, dear." Zara looked up at the cowboy who had found her at her lowest moment. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood." He tipped his hat. "Zav, please, get some rest, Miss Montgomery. Tomorrow's a new day." As he strode away into the gathering darkness, Zara wondered what kind of new day it could possibly be when everything she'd planned had crumbled to dust. Inside, Mrs. Holloway settled Zara at the kitchen table and pressed a cup of tea into her hands. "That young man paid for another week's board for you," she said without preamble. Zara nearly dropped her cup. "He what?" "Said you needed time to get your bearings. Said he'd help you find work too, Mrs. Holloway stirred sugar into her own tea. "Not many would do that for a stranger." "I can't accept such charity," Zara protested, though in truth she had no alternative. "Call it a loan if it sits better with you. Xavier Blackwood doesn't have much himself, but what he has, he shares. Always been that way since he was a boy." Mrs. Holloway patted Zara's hand. "Besides, this town needs good people like you. Most of the women who come through here are either already married or working at Velvet Annie's place." Zara knew enough about frontier towns to understand the reference to the local brothel. She shuddered at the thought. "What skills do you have, dear?" Mrs. Holloway asked. "I can sew, cook, and I taught at a small school in Philadelphia before coming west." "Well now, that's something. We haven't had a proper teacher since Miss Williams married the blacksmith last spring. The town council's been looking to hire someone." For the first time since hearing Xavier's news about Thomas, a tiny glimmer of possibility sparked in Zara's heart. "Do you think they would consider me?" "With Xavier's recommendation, I'd say it's likely. His sister's married to the mayor." Zara sipped her tea, pondering this unexpected turn of events. "Why would he help me? He doesn't know me at all." Mrs. Holloway's eyes grew distant. Xavier came back from the war changed, quieter. "More watchful, but he's always had a good heart. Probably saw someone in need and couldn't walk away." She stood, gathering their cups. "Now get some sleep. Tomorrow's soon enough to make plans." In her small rented room, Zara changed out of her wedding dress at last, carefully folding it into her trunk. She had sewn it with such hope, such dreams of a future with a man she thought she knew. Lying on the narrow bed, she stared at the ceiling and wondered what tomorrow would truly bring in this harsh land where strangers might offer kindness while promised husbands vanished like morning mist. Morning came with the sound of horses and wagons in the street below. Zara dressed in her second-best gown, a sensible blue cotton that had survived the journey west better than her spirits had. Mrs. Holloway provided a hearty breakfast of flapjacks and coffee, during which she outlined the possibilities for employment in Redemption Springs. The general store might need help, and there's the dressmaker, Mrs. Chen. She's always looking for skilled hands. And of course, the school position, though that won't start paying until the town council approves a teacher. Zara nodded, grateful for the woman's help but still overwhelmed by how quickly her circumstances had changed. I should look for immediate work, then. Good morning, ladies. Xavier Blackwood stood in the doorway to the kitchen, hat in hand. His dark hair was damp, as if he'd just washed, and he'd changed into a clean shirt beneath his worn leather vest. Right on time, Mrs. Holloway said approvingly. Sit down and have some coffee while I pack you both some lunch. Oh, I couldn't, Zara began. Nonsense. You're both going to be busy today. The landlady moved efficiently around the kitchen. Xavier, you tell her what you've arranged. He sat across from Zara, those blue eyes meeting hers directly. I spoke with my brother-in-law last night, the mayor, he clarified. He's calling a special meeting of the town council this afternoon to meet you about the teaching position. Zara's heart leapt, then just as quickly fell. But I have nothing prepared, no references with me. They'll telegraph Philadelphia if they need to, but Joseph the mayor was mighty interested when I mentioned you'd been a teacher back east. Our town's growing. Lots of families with children. That's wonderful news, but I'll need something right away, until the position is certain, Xavier nodded. Already thought of that. Mrs. Chen needs help with a rush order. Wedding dresses for the Sullivan twins. You said you can sew? Yes, quite well actually. Good. I told her you'd stop by this morning. He accepted a cup of coffee from Mrs. Holloway. Then this afternoon we'll meet with the council. After that, I thought you might want to see the schoolhouse. It's been closed up a while. Zara studied him over her coffee cup. In the morning light, she could see a thin scar that traced his jawline, partially hidden by a day's stubble. There was a steadiness to him that she found reassuring after the betrayal that had brought her to this moment. Why are you doing all this for me, Mr. Blackwood? Zav, he corrected gently, and I'm doing it because it needs doing. No one should be left stranded, especially not in a place like this. Something in his tone suggested personal experience with such abandonment. Well, I'm very grateful. Zara smoothed her napkin. And I'll repay your loan as soon as I'm able. No rush on that. He stood, draining his coffee. Ready to start your tour of Redemption Springs. The day that followed was unlike any in Zara's memory. The town, which had seemed so hostile in her first lonely days, now revealed itself through Xavier's introductions. Mrs. Chen, a Chinese woman who had come west with her husband during the gold rush, welcomed Zara warmly after Xavier's brief explanation of her situation. You were to marry Thomas Whitley, Mrs. Chen shook her head. That man ordered a suit for his wedding, then disappeared without paying. You are better without him. The dressmaker's tiny shop was crowded with fabrics, and she quickly put Zara to work on delicate embroidery for the Sullivan twins' wedding dresses. Good, steady hands, she approved after watching Zara work. Come back tomorrow. I can use you 3 days a week at least. From there, Xavier escorted her to the mercantile, the post office, and the small church where she would have been married. Everywhere they went, people greeted him with respect and welcomed Zara with curious kindness once they understood she was not, in fact, Thomas Whitley's abandoned bride. People here look out for each other, Xavier explained as they walked toward the mayor's office for her interview. Has to be that way out here, even for strangers, Zara asked, especially for strangers. Everyone here was new once. Even the ones born here had parents who came from somewhere else. He stopped walking, turning to face her. Listen, these council members, they're good people, but they'll want to know your story. How much do you want me to tell them? Zara appreciated his consideration. The truth is fine. I have nothing to be ashamed of. No, he agreed. You don't. The town council consisted of the mayor, Joseph Hamilton, a serious man whose resemblance to Xavier was limited to the same blue eyes, the owner of the mercantile, a cattle rancher, and the town's only doctor. They listened attentively as Zara described her teaching experience in Philadelphia. Why did you leave your position there? Dr. Morrison asked. Zara straightened her shoulders. I believed I was coming west to be married. I answered an advertisement in a Philadelphia newspaper from a man seeking a wife. We corresponded for 8 months before he sent money for my passage. Thomas Whitley, the mayor said, not unkindly. We're aware of the situation, Miss Montgomery. I'm sorry you were deceived. Thank you, but I'm looking forward, not backward now. I need employment, and I understand you need a teacher. The council members exchanged glances. The school term would start in September, the mercantile owner said. That's almost 2 months away. I've already secured part-time work with Mrs. Chen, Zara replied, and Mrs. Holloway has kindly extended my stay at her boarding house. Xavier, who had been standing quietly by the door, spoke up. Miss Montgomery's not asking for charity, gentlemen. She's offering her skills to our community. Seems to me we'd be fools to turn her away when good teachers are hard to come by. The mayor nodded slowly. Well said, Xavier. He turned to Zara. Would you step outside for a moment while we discuss this matter? In the hallway, Zara paced nervously. Her entire future hinged on the decision being made behind that closed door. Xavier joined her, leaning against the wall with the relaxed posture of a man accustomed to waiting. You did well in there, he said. I hope it was enough. She stopped pacing. If not the teaching position, perhaps there are other opportunities here. There are, but you'll get this one. His confidence warmed her. When they were called back in, the mayor stood to address her. Miss Montgomery, we would like to offer you the position of teacher for Redemption Springs School, beginning September 1st. The salary is $40 per month, with housing provided in the rooms above the schoolhouse. We'll need to verify your credentials with your previous employer, but assuming that's satisfactory, the position is yours. Relief washed over Zara like a cool breeze. Thank you, gentlemen, I accept. Outside, the afternoon sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains. Xavier led her toward the edge of town where the schoolhouse stood, a simple wooden building with a small bell tower. It's not much compared to Eastern schools, I expect, he said as he unlocked the door, but it's sturdy. Built it myself, along with some other men in town 3 years ago. Zara stepped inside to find a single room with rows of rough-hewn desks and benches. A larger desk stood at the front, and a blackboard covered most of one wall. It was plain but well-built, with large windows to provide light. It's perfect, she said sincerely. Xavier pointed to a narrow staircase in the corner. Your quarters are up there. Want to see? The rooms above the school were small but adequate, a bedroom, a tiny sitting room, and an area that served as both kitchen and dining room. A rear door led to a small porch with steps down to a yard where a vegetable garden lay untended. Miss Williams started that garden, Xavier explained. No one's kept it up since she left. Zara walked to the window, looking out at the view of mountains in the distance. This small space could be hers, her first true home of her own. I could make this comfortable, she said, more to herself than to him. I'm sure you could. It needs a woman's touch. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, as if unsure whether to enter the space that would soon be her private domain. Zara turned to face him. I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done. In just one day, you've helped me find work, housing, and a purpose here. You don't need to thank me. I just made some introductions. You impressed them all on your own. He hesitated. Listen, I know it's been a whirlwind day, but would you join me for supper at the hotel restaurant to celebrate your new position? The invitation surprised her. I wouldn't want to impose further. It's not an imposition. It's an invitation. His smile transformed his serious face. Unless you're too tired from today's adventures? No, I'd like that very much. The hotel restaurant was the most refined establishment in Redemption Springs, which wasn't saying much by Eastern standards. Still, the tables had proper cloths, the silverware matched, and the aroma of roasting beef filled the air. Xavier had clearly gone home to change before collecting her from Mrs. Holloway's, as he wore a clean shirt with a string tie and had tamed his unruly curls. They were shown to a table near the window, and Xavier held her chair with the careful manners of a man who knew the proper forms but didn't often have occasion to use them. The other diners, mostly traveling businessmen and a few local couples, glanced their way with undisguised curiosity. "People are staring," Zara murmured. "Not used to seeing me in here, I expect," Xavier replied. "Or maybe they're just admiring the company I'm keeping." The compliment brought heat to her cheeks. "You don't dine here often, more likely to be found at Maggie's cafe or taking my meals at home." He opened the menu. "The steak is good here, so's the chicken." Over their meal, Zara learned more about the quiet cowboy who had rescued her from despair. Xavier had indeed fought in the Civil War, riding with the Union cavalry when barely more than a boy. He'd returned to find his parents had died of influenza, leaving him to raise his younger sister until she'd married the mayor 5 years ago. "And you never married?" Zara asked, then immediately regretted her boldness. "I'm sorry, that's too personal. No, it's a fair question." Xavier set down his fork. "Came close once, girl named Lucy. She decided California held more promise than an Arizona cowboy. I'm sorry. We weren't suited in the end. She wanted city life, fine things. I'm happier under open skies." He studied her for a moment. "What about you? Was it just the promise of marriage that brought you west, or something more?" Zara considered the question carefully. "I wanted adventure, I suppose, and a fresh start. My parents died when I was 16, and I've been making my own way since then. Teaching was respectable, but lonely." He suggested, "Yes, and constrained by so many rules about how a lady teacher must behave." She smiled ruefully. "Ironic that I came west for freedom and nearly ended up in an even more desperate situation." "Nearly," Xavier emphasized. "But here you are instead, with a position, lodgings, and a whole new life ahead of you." "Thanks to your kindness," he shook his head. "Thanks to your courage. Not many women would have held themselves together the way you did. Most would have been on the first stage back east." "I couldn't afford the fare," she admitted, "even so." His blue eyes held hers. "Takes grit to face the unknown. That's worth something out here." As they finished their meal, Xavier surprised her by ordering apple pie for dessert. "Best in the territory," he promised. "Mrs. Holloway taught the cook here how to make it." Over the sweet, cinnamon-scented slices, he outlined what the next few weeks might hold. "School doesn't start till September, but there's work to be done getting it ready. The building needs some repairs, and you'll want to take inventory of supplies, plan your lessons." "I can do that alongside my work for Mrs. Chen," Zara said. "And perhaps the garden?" "I could help with that," Xavier offered. "The repairs too. Sunday afternoons I'm usually free." "You've already done so much. I'm offering, not obligated." His voice was gentle but firm. "That's what neighbors do here." As they walked back to Mrs. Holloway's in the gathering twilight, Zara felt a curious lightness. Yesterday, she had believed her life in ruins. Today, she had the beginnings of a new one taking shape. The boarding house appeared ahead, its windows warm with lamplight. "Thank you for dinner," she said as they reached the porch. "It was lovely." "My pleasure." Xavier hesitated. "Miss Montgomery, Zara, I hope you know you're not alone here. If you need anything, anything at all, you just have to ask." The genuine concern in his voice touched her deeply. "I will, and please call me Zara." "Zara," he repeated, as if testing the name. "Good night, then." "Good night, Zav." He waited until she was safely inside before tipping his hat and turning away. Through the window, Zara watched his tall figure disappear into the darkness, wondering at the strange twist of fate that had brought such an unexpected champion into her life just when she needed one most. The following weeks passed in a blur of activity. True to his word, Xavier appeared every Sunday afternoon to help with repairs to the schoolhouse. Under his guidance, Zara learned to replace a loose floorboard, fix a stuck window, and even basic carpentry to build additional bookshelves for the small collection of texts the town had accumulated. The garden behind the schoolhouse gradually came back to life under their combined efforts. Xavier brought seedlings from his own small plot outside town: tomatoes, beans, squash, while Zara planted herbs and flowers to brighten the yard. Working side by side in the warm summer sun, they fell into an easy companionship. "Where did you learn all this?" Zara asked one Sunday as she watched him mend the schoolhouse roof. "Carpentry and farming, I mean." Xavier hammered another nail into place before answering. My father was what they call a jack of all trades, taught me everything he knew. Said a man should be able to build or fix anything he needs. He sounds like a wise man. He was. Xavier's expression grew distant. Wish he could have seen what the town's become. He always believed in this place, even when it was just a few shacks and a lot of hope. And your mother. Strongest woman I ever knew, traveled west in a covered wagon as a bride, built a life from nothing but sagebrush and determination. He climbed down the ladder. You remind me of her sometimes, that same grit. The comparison warmed her, though she wondered if she truly possessed such strength. Certainly, the past weeks had tested her in ways she never imagined. Between her work at Mrs. Chen's shop, preparing the schoolhouse, and becoming acquainted with the families whose children would soon be her pupils, Zara had little time to dwell on Thomas Whitley's betrayal. In the evenings, she often found herself sitting on Mrs. Holloway's porch with Xavier, watching the sunset paint the western sky in spectacular colors. Sometimes they talked about books they'd read, places they'd seen, dreams they still harbored. Other times they simply sat in comfortable silence, content in each other's company. Will you miss this view when you move to the schoolhouse? Xavier asked one evening as the first stars appeared. I'll miss Mrs. Holloway's cooking more, Zara joked. Then, more seriously, and these conversations, they've become the best part of my days. Xavier's eyes, reflecting the last light of day, met hers. Mine, too. The admission hung between them, neither willing to explore its implications just yet. Zara was still recovering from having her heart broken, still finding her footing in this new life. And Xavier, she sensed, carried his own caution when it came to matters of the heart. As August drew to a close, Zara prepared to move into her quarters above the schoolhouse. The town council had approved funds for new books and supplies, and the first day of school was just a week away. 28 students were enrolled, ranging from 6-year-old beginners to teenagers completing their education before entering adult life. Nervous? Xavier asked as he carried the last of her belongings up the narrow stairs to her new home. Terrified, Zara admitted, arranging her small collection of books on the shelf he'd built. What if I can't maintain discipline? What if the older boys won't listen to me? What if I'm simply not good enough? Xavier set down her trunk and turned to face her. You'll be fine. These kids need learning and you have knowledge to share. The rest will sort itself out. You make it sound so simple. Not simple, but possible. He glanced around the small apartment. You've made this place nice. Indeed, Zara had transformed the spare rooms with her limited resources. Curtains sewn from fabric scraps brightened the windows. A colorful quilt Mrs. Holloway had gifted her covered the bed, and wildflowers from their Sunday walks filled a jar on the table. It feels like home already, she said, surprised to realize it was true. This place that had been unknown to her just months ago now felt more like home than anywhere she'd lived since her parents died. Good. Xavier seemed about to say more when a knock sounded on the schoolhouse door below. Expecting anyone? No. Zara smoothed her skirt and headed downstairs, Xavier following. A stranger stood on the schoolhouse step, a well-dressed man in a city suit, his hat clutched in his hands. Miss Montgomery, he inquired when she opened the door. Yes, Thomas Whitley sent me. The name hit Zara like a physical blow. Behind her, she felt Xavier stiffen. What business does Whitley have with Miss Montgomery? Xavier's voice had lost its usual warmth. The stranger eyed Xavier warily. And you are a friend, Xavier stated firmly. Anything you have to say can be said in front of me. Zara nodded her agreement, though her heart pounded uncomfortably. Please, what is your message? Mr. Whitley asked me to convey his deepest apologies for the misunderstanding. He was unexpectedly called to San Francisco on urgent business and was unable to send word before his departure. The man produced an envelope from his jacket. He wishes to make amends and has sent this as a token of his contrition. Zara accepted the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a bank draft for a considerable sum, more than enough to pay her way back east if she chose, or to establish herself comfortably in Redemption Springs. Mr. Whitley hopes you will forgive his inconsiderate behavior and perhaps consider resuming your correspondence, the messenger continued. He expects to return to Arizona territory by year's end and would call upon you then, with your permission." Xavier's face had hardened into an unreadable mask, but Zara could sense the tension radiating from him. She looked from the bank draft to the messenger, a sudden clarity filling her. "Please tell Mr. Whitley that while I accept his financial restitution for my journey, I have no interest in resuming our acquaintance." She folded the bank draft and tucked it into her pocket. "I've made a life here now, a good life." The messenger appeared surprised. "Perhaps you should take some time to consider." "No," Zara interrupted firmly. "My answer won't change. Thank you for delivering his message and this draft. Good day, sir." After the messenger departed, Zara closed the door and leaned against it, emotions warring within her. Relief at the financial security the draft provided mingled with lingering anger at Thomas's cavalier treatment and a strange sense of closure. "Are you all right?" Xavier asked quietly. "Yes," she said, surprising herself with the truth of it. "I am. You could go back east now if you wanted." The uncertainty in his voice made her look up sharply. Xavier stood rigid, his hands clenched at his sides, his expression carefully neutral. But his eyes, those expressive blue eyes, revealed what he couldn't say, the fear that she might leave. "I don't want to go back," Zara said softly. "There's nothing for me there. Everything I want is here now." The tension drained from Xavier's shoulders. "I'm glad to hear that." "I should repay your loan first thing," Zara said, patting her pocket where the draft lay. "No rush." Xavier moved toward the door. "I should go." "Let you get settled in, would you? Would you like to stay for supper? I was going to try out the stove for the first time." He hesitated, then smiled. "I'd like that very much." That evening marked a subtle shift in their relationship. As they prepared a simple meal together in her tiny kitchen, their conversation flowed easily, but with a new undercurrent of awareness. Their hands brushed as they worked, and each accidental touch sent a flicker of warmth through Zara that had nothing to do with the heat from the stove. By the time September arrived, bringing with it the first day of school, Zara had settled comfortably into her new home and role in the community. The opening day saw her standing nervously before her classroom of students, ranging from solemn-faced little ones to lanky teenagers trying to appear disinterested. "Good morning," she began. "I'm Miss Montgomery, and I'm honored to be your teacher this year." From the back of the room, a boy of about 14 called out, "Is it true you came here to marry Thomas Whitley?" And he ran off. A ripple of whispers and giggles spread through the classroom. Zara felt her cheeks flush, but she maintained her composure. "What's your name?" she asked the boy. "Samuel Peterson," he answered with a hint of defiance. "Well, Samuel, while the details of my personal life aren't relevant to your education, I believe in honesty. Yes, I originally came west expecting to marry. Those plans changed. Instead, I found my true calling as your teacher." She smiled at the class. "Now, shall we begin with our lessons, or would you prefer to discuss my romantic disappointments further?" Samuel had the grace to look abashed, and a few of the other children giggled. But the tension had broken, and as Zara launched into her introduction to the year's curriculum, she felt the class's attention engage. By the end of that first week, Zara had established herself as firm but fair, earning the respect of even her most reluctant students. On Friday afternoon, as the children raced home, she found Xavier waiting outside the schoolhouse. "How was your first week, teacher?" he asked, falling into step beside her as she walked to the general store for supplies. "Exhausting, exhilarating, everything in between," she laughed. "I've never been so tired or so satisfied with a day's work. The children like you, I've heard them talking. Even Samuel Peterson," Xavier grinned. "Especially him, though he'd never admit it. His father says he actually did his reading assignment without being forced to first." The general store was busy with Friday shoppers, and as they entered, Zara was greeted warmly by several parents. She noticed the way people nodded respectfully to Xavier, the way children approached him without fear, the genuine regard in which the community held him. "You never told me you were on the town council," she said as they left the store, her purchases in a basket over her arm. Xavier looked surprised. "How did you know?" Mrs. Peterson mentioned it, said you spoke up about needing more school supplies at the last meeting. He shrugged, uncomfortable with the recognition. Seemed important. It is important, thank you, she hesitated. Actually, I was hoping to speak with the council about organizing a harvest festival for the children and families, a celebration before winter sets in. That's a fine idea. Bring it to Tuesday's meeting. He paused at the corner where their paths would diverge. Will you be at church on Sunday? Yes, then I thought I might work in the garden after. The tomatoes need staking. I'll come by to help. He touched the brim of his hat. Good evening, Miss Montgomery. Good evening, Mr. Blackwood. As she watched him walk away, Zara acknowledged to herself what she had been increasingly unable to deny. Her feelings for Xavier Blackwood had grown far beyond gratitude or friendship. But whether he felt the same, or if he saw her merely as a responsibility he had assumed, she couldn't be certain. The Harvest Festival became Zara's passion project over the following weeks. The town council embraced the idea enthusiastically, seeing it as a way to bring the community together before the harsher weather of late autumn arrived. With Xavier's help, Zara organized games for the children, a baking contest for the women, and competitions of strength and skill for the men. You've brought new life to this town, Mrs. Holloway told her as they hung paper lanterns for the evening dance that would conclude the festival. Haven't seen folks this excited about anything in years. I've done very little, Zara demurred. Everyone has helped. Not everyone could have inspired such cooperation. The older woman gave her a knowing look. Xavier certainly seems invested in your success. Zara busied herself with another lantern to hide her blush. He's been very supportive of the school, indeed, Mrs. Holloway's tone was dry. That boy hasn't taken his eyes off you at Sunday services for weeks, but I'm sure it's all about educational standards. Before Zara could formulate a response, Xavier himself appeared, carrying more decorations. Ladies, he greeted them. The platform for the musicians is ready. The day of the festival dawned clear and cool, perfect weather for the outdoor activities planned. The town square had been transformed with bunting and banners. Stalls offered food and drink, and families arrived early, dressed in their Sunday best despite it being a Saturday. Zara wore her blue dress, the same one she'd worn that first day Xavier escorted her around town. She had added new lace at the collar and cuffs, a small luxury afforded by Thomas Whitley's bank draft, most of which remained untouched in the Redemption Springs Bank. The festival exceeded even Zara's optimistic expectations. Children laughed as they bobbed for apples and raced in potato sacks. Women proudly displayed their preserves and baked goods for judging. Men tested their strength in friendly competition, with Xavier winning the axe-throwing contest to enthusiastic applause. As dusk fell, lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow over the square. The local musicians, a fiddler, guitarist, and accordion player, took their places on the platform, and the dancing began. Zara watched from the sidelines, enjoying the sight of couples swirling to the lively music. "Teacher, you're not dancing," 6-year-old Lily Peterson tugged at her skirt. "Mr. Blackwood isn't dancing either. You should dance together." Zara glanced across the square to where Xavier stood talking with some of the ranchers. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, their eyes meeting across the distance. "Maybe later, Lily," Zara said, but the child had already darted away through the crowd. To Zara's mortification, she watched Lily approach Xavier, clearly relaying her suggestion. Xavier's expression changed from surprise to something softer as he nodded to the little girl. Then he was making his way through the dancers toward Zara. "Miss Montgomery," he said formally, though his eyes held a warmth that made her pulse quicken. "I understand I've been instructed to request a dance." "Lily is very concerned about participation," Zara managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Smart girl." Xavier extended his hand. "Would you do me the honor?" Zara placed her hand in his. "I'd be delighted." The musicians had just begun a waltz slower and more intimate than the reels and square dances that had preceded it. Xavier led her onto the makeshift dance floor, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers as they began to move with the music. "I didn't know you could dance," Zara said, acutely aware of his nearness, the light pressure of his hand at her waist, the scent of soap and leather that she had come to associate with him. My mother insisted I learn, said no son of hers would stomp around like a buffalo at social gatherings. His smile was reminiscent. She'd be pleased to see I remembered her lessons. She would be proud of the man you've become, Zara said softly. Xavier's eyes darkened. I hope so. They danced in silence for a moment, moving together as if they had done so countless times before. I've been meaning to tell you, Xavier said finally. I'm taking on a new position. The school board has asked me to serve as its chairman. That's wonderful news, Zara replied sincerely. You'll be excellent in the role. It means we'll be working together more officially. I look forward to it. The music wound down, but neither moved to separate. Around them, other couples were leaving the dance floor, but Xavier still held Zara close, his blue eyes searching hers. Zara, he began, his voice low. Xavier, there you are. Mayor Hamilton approached, breaking the moment. Sorry to interrupt, but we need you for the awards presentation. With visible reluctance, Xavier released Zara. Of course, I'll be right there. He turned back to her. Save another dance for me, I will, she promised. But the opportunity never arose. The awards ceremony led to more speeches, then the closing bonfire, and suddenly the festival was ending, families gathering their sleepy children to head home. Zara found herself surrounded by mothers thanking her for organizing the event, students recounting their favorite parts of the day, and by the time she had a moment to look for Xavier, he had been pulled into conversation with a group of ranchers. Tired but content, Zara began the walk back to the schoolhouse. The night had grown chilly, and she wrapped her shawl more tightly around her shoulders. Footsteps behind her made her turn. Thought you might want some company on your walk home, Xavier said, falling into step beside her. Thank you, it was getting rather dark. They walked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the sounds of the dispersing festival fading behind them. It was a success, Xavier said. Your festival, everyone's already talking about making it an annual event. I'm glad. It felt important to create something that brings people together. She glanced sideways at him. Though I had a great deal of help. You inspired the help, that's a rare gift. They reached the schoolhouse, moonlight silvering its simple wooden structure. Zara turned to face Xavier at the bottom of the steps. Would you like to come in for coffee? It's not too late. He hesitated, and for a moment Zara feared she had been too forward. Then he nodded. Coffee would be nice. Inside, Zara lit the lamps and stoked the small stove while Xavier removed his hat, standing somewhat awkwardly in the center of her small sitting room. This was the first time he had been upstairs since she had properly moved in, and she saw him taking in the personal touches. She had added the cushions she had embroidered, the small paintings she had purchased from a traveling artist, the photographs of her parents in their simple frames. It suits you, he said. This place, it feels like home now. Zara busied herself with the coffee pot. I never expected to find that feeling again after my parents died. Home isn't always a place, Xavier said quietly. Sometimes it's a feeling, a sense of belonging. Zara turned to find him standing closer than she expected, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes, the slight curl of his hair where it touched his collar. I found that here, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. That sense of belonging. Zara. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. What I was trying to say earlier before Joseph interrupted. She waited, heart pounding. I know it hasn't been long since you came here, since things didn't work out with Whitley, and I don't want to rush you or presume anything. He took a deep breath. But I find myself thinking about you all the time, wondering if you might someday see me as more than just the man who happened to be there when you needed help. Zara set down the coffee cups she had been holding. I stopped seeing you that way a long time ago, Zav. Hope flickered in his eyes. How do you see me then? As the man who showed me what real kindness looks like, who never asked for anything in return, who made me laugh when I thought I might never smile again. She took a step closer to him. As the man I've fallen in love with. The words hung in the air between them, and for a terrifying moment, Zara feared she had misread everything. Then Xavier's hands were gently cradling her face, his eyes searching hers for confirmation. I've loved you since that first Sunday, he admitted. Working beside you in the garden, seeing your determination to build a new life here, but I was afraid it was too soon, that you needed time." "I've had time enough to know my own heart," Zara said, "and it belongs to you, Xavier Blackwood." His kiss was gentle at first, a question rather than a demand. Zara answered by sliding her arms around his neck, drawing him closer. The coffee was forgotten as they stood in the lamplight, discovering each other in this new way. When they finally parted, Xavier rested his forehead against hers. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "It's late and people talk in small towns, I know," but she made no move to release him. "Will I see you tomorrow after church? Wild horses couldn't keep me away," he smiled, kissing her once more before retrieving his hat. "Good night, Zara Montgomery." "Good night, Zav." At the door he paused. "Just so we're clear, I'm courting you now, properly." The declaration, so formal and yet so endearingly earnest, made her smile. "I would expect nothing less." After he left, Zara stood at her window, watching his tall figure move down the moonlit street. Her heart felt too full for her chest, expanding with a happiness she had never expected to find in this dusty frontier town. The autumn months brought a new rhythm to Zara's life. Weekdays were filled with teaching, a vocation she found increasingly rewarding as her students progressed. Evenings often found Xavier at her door, sometimes with a small gift, a book he thought she might enjoy, fresh honey from a local beekeeper, wildflowers gathered on his ride into town. They would talk for hours or simply sit companionably reading by the fire as the nights grew colder. Sundays became their special time together. After church, they would work in her garden until it was put to bed for winter, then take long walks outside town, Xavier pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of his childhood in the territory. Sometimes they rode double on his horse to places too distant to reach on foot, a hidden waterfall, a mesa with views that stretched to the horizon, an ancient indigenous dwelling carved into a cliff face. Their courtship was conducted with a propriety that respected Zara's position as the town's teacher, while acknowledging the growing depth of their feelings. Xavier was careful never to compromise her reputation, always ensuring she was home well before dark, never presuming liberties beyond the occasional kiss when they were certain of privacy. "You're being particularly careful about my good name," Zara teased him one Sunday afternoon as they sat by the creek that ran behind his small ranch outside town. "Especially for a man who once told me the rules are different out here." Xavier skipped a stone across the water. "Maybe I want to do this right. You deserve that." "And what is this exactly?" She held her breath, waiting for his answer. He turned to face her, his expression serious. "A future together, if that's what you want too." Joy bloomed in her chest. "It is more than anything." As December approached, bringing with it preparations for Christmas, Zara found herself busier than ever. The school was organizing a Christmas pageant, the first in several years, and every child in town seemed determined to participate. Xavier, in his role as school board chairman, attended rehearsals, ostensibly to help with the construction of scenery, but more often simply watching Zara with undisguised admiration as she patiently guided her students through their parts. "You're a natural with them," he commented one evening as they walked home after a particularly chaotic rehearsal, "even with Samuel Peterson forgetting his lines for the third time." "He's trying very hard," Zara defended her most challenging student, "and he's improved so much in his studies." "That's your influence." Xavier took her hand, a liberty they now allowed themselves during their evening walks. "You see the best in people. You saw something in me worth believing in. You made that easy." She squeezed his hand. "Speaking of Christmas, what would you think about joining me for Christmas dinner? Mrs. Holloway has invited us both. I'd be honored, though I was hoping you might also consider coming to my place for Christmas Eve." He seemed uncharacteristically nervous. "It's nothing fancy, but there's a tradition of watching the stars on Christmas Eve. My parents always said they shone brighter that night." "That sounds lovely," Zara said softly. "I'd love to share that with you." The night of the Christmas pageant arrived with a light dusting of snow, rare enough in their part of Arizona to seem magical. The schoolhouse was packed with parents, siblings, and townspeople, all crowded onto benches to watch the children perform the nativity story. Despite forgotten lines, a wayward sheep costume, and stage fright that rendered one of the wise men temporarily mute, the pageant was declared a tremendous success. As the audience applauded and children took their bows, Zara felt a surge of pride in her students and gratitude for the community that had embraced her so warmly. "Speech," someone called as the applause continued. Zara stepped forward, smoothing her best dress, a deep green wool that she had splurged on for the occasion. "Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm so proud of our students and all their hard work. When I came to Redemption Springs just a few months ago, I couldn't have imagined how quickly this place would become home or how dear you all would become to me." Her eyes found Xavier in the front row, his face alight with pride. Sometimes the greatest blessings come from unexpected beginnings. "I was meant to find my way here, to this school, to this community." Her voice softened. "To all of you, Merry Christmas." The celebration continued with refreshments in the schoolroom. Parents congratulated Zara, children excitedly recounted their favorite moments, and even the usually reserved Mayor Hamilton declared it the finest Christmas pageant in the territory's history. Through it all, Xavier remained close to Zara's side, quietly supportive as she navigated her duties as hostess. It was nearly midnight before the last families departed, and Zara could finally sink into a chair, exhausted but happy. "You did it," Xavier said, sitting beside her. "Quite the triumph for your first term as teacher. Our students did it. I just guided them a little." She leaned her head against his shoulder, propriety forgotten in her fatigue. "Thank you for staying to help clean up. Wouldn't be anywhere else." He placed a gentle kiss on her forehead. "You should get some rest. I'll finish here." "No, I'll help." She straightened, stifling a yawn. "Just give me a moment." Xavier chuckled. "Always determined." He reached into his pocket. "I was going to wait until Christmas Eve, but seeing you tonight, how much you've accomplished, how much you mean to this town to me, I don't want to wait." Zara's breath caught as he withdrew a small box. "Zara Montgomery," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, "when you came to Redemption Springs, you were waiting for someone who never deserved you. I found you that day, heartbroken and alone, but in truth, I think I'm the one who found home." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring with a small pearl. "This was my mother's. She made me promise I'd only give it to a woman with the same strength and heart she had." He took Zara's hand. "I've found that woman in you. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears filled Zara's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, with all my heart." Xavier slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. When they finally parted, both were smiling through tears. "I love you, Xavier Blackwood," Zara said. "I never expected to find you, but I can't imagine my life without you now." "You'll never have to," he promised. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." Christmas Eve found them on the porch of Xavier's small ranch house, wrapped in blankets against the chill, watching stars appear one by one in the velvet sky. The house behind them was humble but well built, with solid walls and a good roof, a place that could become a home for both of them after their wedding, which they had agreed would take place in the spring. "My father used to say that on Christmas Eve, the stars are really angels watching over us," Xavier said, his arm around Zara as they gazed upward. "I always thought it was just a story for children, but tonight I could almost believe it." Zara nestled closer to him, her hand with its pearl ring resting on his chest. "I think there are angels among us every day, people who appear exactly when we need them most." Xavier kissed the top of her head. "Like a teacher who arrives and transforms a town." "Like a cowboy who stops to help a heartbroken bride," she countered. They fell silent, content in each other's company as the stars multiplied above them. Tomorrow would bring Christmas celebrations with the community that had become their extended family. The new year would bring preparations for their wedding and the life they would build together. But tonight was just for them, two souls who had found each other against all odds in the vast wilderness of the Arizona territory. "Merry Christmas, my love," Xavier whispered. "Merry Christmas." Zara replied, lifting her face for his kiss as the stars continued their silent vigil overhead. Spring arrived in Redemption Springs with a riot of wildflowers and the promise of new beginnings. The schoolhouse had been decorated with ribbons and flowers for the occasion, and the entire town had turned out to witness the marriage of their beloved teacher to the man who had first welcomed her to their community. Zara stood before the mirror in her quarters above the schoolroom, hardly recognizing the radiant woman who looked back at her. Her wedding dress, sewn by Mrs. Chen with help from several of the town's women, was simple but elegant, with delicate embroidery at the neck and hem. In her hair, she wore a crown of spring blossoms gathered by her students that morning. "You look beautiful," Mrs. Holloway said, adjusting the veil. "Xavier won't know what hit him." Zara smiled, thinking of how far she had come since that dusty day when she had sat heartbroken on a crate, waiting for a man who never came. "I can hardly believe this is real." "Believe it, my dear, you've earned this happiness." Mrs. Holloway checked the clock. "It's time, ready to become Mrs. Blackwood, more than ready." The ceremony was simple but deeply moving. Xavier, standing tall and handsome in a new suit, watched with undisguised adoration as Zara walked toward him on Mayor Hamilton's arm. They spoke their vows in clear, steady voices, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever life might bring. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Xavier's kiss was both tender and possessive, drawing good-natured cheers from their assembled friends and neighbors. Zara felt as if her heart might burst with happiness as they turned to face the community as a married couple for the first time. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening, with dancing, feasting, and so much laughter that Zara's cheeks ached. As darkness fell, Xavier led her away from the festivities toward their future home, his ranch house that they had spent weeks preparing together, making it truly theirs. He surprised her by lifting her into his arms to carry her across the threshold. "Welcome home, Mrs. Blackwood," he murmured against her hair. "Home," Zara repeated, the word filled with all the meaning they had discovered together. "It sounds perfect." Later, as they lay in each other's arms, the future stretching before them like an unwritten story, Zara thought about the strange twist of fate that had brought her west. What had seemed like disaster had led her to this moment, this man, this life that exceeded any dreams she might have had. "What are you thinking?" Xavier asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "That sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected beginnings." She traced the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "I came west for one dream and found a better one waiting." "We'll build that dream together," he promised. Day by day, and they did. The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure. The school continued to grow under Zara's guidance, eventually requiring the construction of a larger building and the hiring of a second teacher. Xavier's reputation as a horse trainer grew throughout the territory, bringing a comfortable prosperity to their lives. Their family grew too, first with the birth of their daughter, Emma, whose blue eyes matched her father's. Then 2 years later with their son, William, who inherited his mother's quiet determination. Their home, once a bachelor's simple dwelling, expanded to accommodate their growing family, with additions built by Xavier's own hands. Through it all, Zara never forgot that moment of despair on the crate outside the general store, or the man who had knelt beside her and changed the course of her life. Each anniversary, they would walk together to that spot, now fronting a busy mercantile, and Xavier would kneel again, this time in playful remembrance. "It was the luckiest day of my life," he would say, "finding a heartbroken bride who became the heart of my home." And Zara, looking into the eyes of the man who had shown her the true meaning of love, could only agree. From unexpected beginnings had come the greatest blessing of all, a love that had transformed not just 2 lives, but an entire community, proving that sometimes the end of one dream is simply the beginning of a better one.